All right, thank you so much. So I'm going to ask 5 people really quickly what your reaction was to the movie. But first, I'm going to ask you a question, esteemed director person, that when I looked at civil rights history for this century, Glen Echo wasn't on the milestone. So how does it feel to be contributing to history?
Wow, that's such a good question.
And you thought I wasn't ready.
Thank you. Well, first, I just want to thank the Boston Jewish Film Festival and all of you for coming out tonight. It's really an honor to be part of the festival, and it's maybe I'll tell you why later, but it holds a really special place in my heart. And also, there are clipboards that are being passed around. If people are interested in finding out about future screenings, they can join our mailing list. Wow. I really hope that I am contributing to civil rights history. I hope that this story becomes a part of civil rights history. I hope that it's something that gets taught because not just for the fact that I think it is like significant civil rights history. It was the source of so many firsts and laid the foundation for all kinds of people who learned certain things as a result of being involved, and then they went out into their respective campuses and cities and future lives armed with the tools that they learned, working together. Most of all, probably the value of interracial cooperation. But I think the most important reason to me that this should be part of civil rights history is because we don't ever learn in school about the regular people. And the way that we're taught the civil rights movement is, some variation on Martin Luther King and I Have a Dream. And, if you're Jewish, you usually learn about Abraham Joshua Heschel and, and his relationship with Martin Luther King. But we don't learn about, the truth that the vast majority of people who participated in the civil rights movement didn't go to the bridge at Selma. They just acted locally and, stood up at their lunch counters or libraries or amusement parks. And we need to know about those people so that we know that we all have a part to play on history's stage. We all have agency, and especially at this moment, we all need to remember that it's not just the Martin Luther Kings or the Abraham Joshua Heschels, that it's all of us, that we can all do something.
So I think the documentary is a very powerful form of storytelling. And so I'm going to ask Ms. Shakur to talk about how you guys are using storytelling and the foundation.
Well, thank you so much. First of all, I just want to thank Ilana for making such an incredibly powerful and inspiring film. So can we just give her another huge round of applause? It's so incredible. And thank you to the Boston Jewish Film Festival for featuring the film. So I'm Ayele Shakur with the Redstone Family Foundation. I have the great privilege of working with Shari Redstone on really thinking about how we are combating the rise of divisiveness, racism, anti-Semitism, and hate in this country and replacing it with empathy and unity and understanding. So at the foundation, we're doing a lot around building cross-cultural understanding, working with young people, children, youth, and adults. And as part of that work, we have a film impact series, which is really focused on films, right now really focused heavily on films that feature history of the Black and Jewish communities and how we have come together historically in the past to do really incredible things. And I think what we see in this particular film that's so beautiful, it was never about, we never had a time where all of Black America and all of Jewish America were aligned. Right? When we talk about allyship, there's sort of this romanticized view of, there was a time when we were so close together as allies. And that's actually never been true. It's always been individuals in the Black community, individuals in the Jewish community who came together in really, really powerful ways, as we saw in this film. And that's what we're starting to see again. There's such a wonderful resurgence of really rebirthing this alliance between the Black and Jewish community, and it's being done actually all across the country. I can share a little more about that as we go. I don't want to take away from the.
You got the mic. Keep going.
But I mean, it's been heartwarming to see that, you know, first of all, when you watch a film like that, there's so much power in our shared history, right? We have over 100 years of history together between the Black and Jewish community, going back to the founding of the NAACP in 1909, to the founding of the Urban League in 1910. We did a film in our film series called From Swastika to Jim Crow that talked about a group of scholars who they were exiled from Nazi Germany, and when they came to the United States, they could not find work in the northern universities because of anti-Semitism, but they were welcomed in the South by our historically Black colleges and universities. So that film, which takes place in the 30s and 40s, is really showing that connection between the Black and Jewish communities and the creation of the HBCUs. And then, of course, we all know about what happened during the Civil Rights Movement. It is so important that we not let 100 years of history die. And because of that, there have been more and more groups across the nation. There's a wonderful group called Rekindle that's creating Black and Jewish chapters. They've got over 15 chapters and growing. The foundation's really happy to support that. We just did a film series just 2 weeks ago. Many people are here in the audience from that series. That was a screening of the film called Shared Legacies, which talks about the Civil Rights Movement. We had 80 leaders from the Black and Jewish community that came together to see the film and then have dinner and conversation afterwards. So I'm just excited that there are, again, individuals who are saying, no, we're not going to let an alliance die. It is going to take individuals standing up, as we saw in the film, and committing to work together, and that's what's happening. And what's happening in Boston, in Cleveland, in New York, in LA, in Atlanta, and just so many other places across the country.
Thank you. Now, I said I was going to ask 5 people for their reactions. So let me see some hands. One of the 5 who want to say first reaction to seeing the movie. Yes?
I really want to thank you. I appreciated this film so much. I really like that you ended it with the Women's March, which happened the day after Trump's first, the beginning of Trump's first reign. It was so powerful for me because I've been thinking a lot over the last few days, talking to people a lot over the last few days. And we're all going to have so many opportunities, way too many opportunities to stand up for our immigrant neighbors, to stand up for others. It's really important to be empowered with this kind of history and know that we can do it.
Great. Another reaction. Now, there we go, yes.
I would think that this is a film that is distributed on a mass basis could be shown in many, many Black churches in this country and Jewish synagogues.
All right, that's 2. Next. Okay. Yes.
I just want to say I loved it.
There you go. That's what you like to hear as a director.
A story that I was not at all aware of, so thank you very much.
All right, yes.
I grew up in River Road, so around 2 blocks away. It was 68, so it was already shut down. I'm just curious, I think the sort of general Black Jewish, but really the Jewish dynamics were complicated. It was owned by the Jewish club. I'm just curious, Ilana, if did you investigate? I never heard the story at all, so I really appreciate it. I have no idea if it had any types. I'm just curious if the organized Jewish community get involved at all. Did you try to see what sort of was going on in the intra-Jewish community dynamics of these communities being challenged by, Jewish folks?
Am I allowed to answer?
You are.
Keep going to. Okay.
You are.
Thank you. So I actually, well, let me just start out by saying it's very hard to research a story that was never marked or indicated anywhere as important history, right?
It is now.
Well, what I did was I went through the minutes of every existing synagogue the summer of 1960. I went through like their committee minutes, their sisterhoods, their brotherhoods, their leadership meetings. I'm sure you know all those synagogues. Some of them don't exist anymore. And the JCC was called something. It was called something else. It's escaping me, but like the equivalent of federation. And nobody mentioned it. It's not in any Jewish publication. It's like radio silence on the part of the organized Jewish community.
All right, a couple more. Yes, I mentioned you before. Sorry.
My first reaction was it should be shown in all schools.
Yes.
Absolutely. And also, I was wondering if you do programs for families. It was interesting to me in the movie that a lot of the female Jewish activists were daughters of pretty strong mothers, and I just didn't know if there was a family component, especially since the Surgeon General's announcement about parents and feeling overwhelmed and under siege of public health issue.
The woman behind you is dying to say something.
Well, because I was one of the children on the picket line, as were a lot of my friends right here.
Yes. Yeah.
And as I recall, I was a child, so I don't recall much, but I remember walking on the picket line with my mother, and we lived next door to the Delaplanes, and our whole block got involved in helping a supply, I guess, the picketers. But it was very much a multi-generational activity. All the moms brought the kids down.
Well, that's what I noticed, and I was
Yeah. wondering
if, we go into schools, we go into temples, but is there a intention for family also? Intention for family.
Yeah, it's a really important idea. Ilana and I were talking about the school outreach piece is a huge piece of our Film Impact series. I know it's one of your hopes to get the film into schools, middle schools, high schools, and colleges. We do have a program at the foundation called Building Togetherness, which is for preschool children, really teaching them to appreciate various cultures, including Jewish culture, alongside Black and African American culture, Latino culture, and so forth. And in that program, we do include the families. I love the idea of including families for the films because there's so much that goes on at home and how young people learn to love instead of learning to hate. So it is really important to bring the families into
Yeah, I'll just say one thing about the outreach and the plans for the film. After last week, I woke up on Wednesday like the rest of us, totally devastated, and somewhere like under the covers there, it occurred to me that I have this film, I have this story, and it's a story that centers decency and cooperation and respect and grassroots mobilizing and intergroup partnership, and this is a weapon in a way. This story is a tool, and I had been planning on waiting or just sort of, letting the film sort of live its natural life, and that maybe next year I would cut down the film into classroom length and then distribute it to schools for use. And then, I realized I don't have that kind of time, and who knows what is going to happen to school curriculum, after January 20th. And so one of the things I'm doing right now is I'm rapidly fundraising in order to raise the money to cut down the film and distribute it with Teacher's Guide and curriculum, so that if I can do it by the end of the year, then I can actually get the film into schools by February of Black History Month of next year. We'll get it into the schools in January so it could be shown in February. And one of the things that I'm thinking about, and we're piloting this in particular with a school in Washington, that is going to watch the whole entirety of the film, they're going to watch the entirety of the film as part of like a school assembly, and then we are making the film available, we're streaming it like for 72 hours for the parents so that they can watch it at home and watch it at night, and then the school itself is going to be doing a program like for parents and kids. So I don't know, I mean, you know, if that's successful, then maybe that's something that we can replicate in other places.
So you both mentioned your various educational outreaches, and I think for myself, it reminds me of in Exodus when there was a Pharaoh that knew not of Joseph. And I think of us not knowing the civil rights history and the black Jewish allyship over the last 100 years. So just like you were saying, the founding of the Niagara movement and the NAACP and the Urban League, all the way up, all the civil rights leaders, A. Philip Randolph, Paul Robeson, etc. And that's not something that you would know. And so you wouldn't know that there was this relationship over the last 100 years. And so now it's almost as though creating this is something new because we don't know the history that it has. So it reminds me of like when they're crossing the Jordan River and they put the stones up so that in the future people say, what do these stones mean? And they always talk about the fact that this is the time that God parted the waters for us to go on the other side. And so I'm wondering, should there be a memorial or a monument in some way to memorialize our black Jewish allyship over the 100 years so that we could always say, what is this about? And we would be able to learn that history. What do you think?
I want to say something actually because I'm realizing that I'm like increasingly like a little uncomfortable in that like I think it's really a fallacy to like say the black Jewish relationship, you know, and you alluded to this, and I don't think this film is about the black Jewish relationship. You know, it's really about like one protest, one group of people, one moment in time, these individuals, and you know they certainly represent many people, but they don't speak for everybody. And also, like, plenty of the white people on the picket line were not Jewish, and Bannockburn was not entirely Jewish. And I think, like, just the same way that we can't speak about the Jewish community and be talking about, and as if it's monolithic, you know, we can't speak about the black Jewish relationship because it's so complicated. It's just starting with the fact that, you know, there were Jews who are not people that we are proud of, and there were African American people who were not supportive of the Howard students. And so I just think it's important not to erase complexity.
So I thought you did a good job in capturing that because, you know, when I watched it the second time, I said, geez, it's really interesting that the black community in the neighborhood wasn't the one that led the picket. So even though the people in the community could see the other kids playing and they wanted to go, they weren't the leaders. And the fact that these quote-unquote outsiders from Howard not everybody agreed with that. And also the fact that the people thought that integrating an amusement park was a much lower priority than trying to integrate for basically employment and jobs and housing. So even within the community, you talk about not all Jewish people, not all black people felt the same way, they didn't even agree that this should be a priority.
Well, again, neither group is a monolith, and you know, I think you made a little Freudian slip between Howard and Harvard, which everyone got. You know,
that's because I went to MIT, so.
That's fine. But, you know, I do think that what we're seeing even today is that there's a lot of sort of broadcasting of the Jewish communities doing this, the black communities doing that. And to your point, we are all individuals. There are no monolithic groups. And so there are plenty of allies that are still continuing to work together. If there's any message I want to continue to drive home, the allyship is alive and well. You also still see all of the variations in both both communities, that doesn't mean that there aren't good people still working together and trying to accomplish shared goals. So the other thing I just want to point out is, so I'm a child of the 60s. My mom grew up she's in her 80s and experienced all of the Jim Crow segregation growing up in North Carolina. So we have all of these young, I'm going to call them the young folks who are from Glen Echo, who are here today, sort of who were children back then. And we're just so grateful to have you here in the audience. Wish some of you were actually up here to share some of your stories. But just a reminder that this history is very, very recent. But I don't think that our generation has done a great job of sharing this history with our own children. So I think we all have things to, we have to sort of look back and say, how much are we teaching our children? My son's 41. How much have we shared with our own children to say, this was the history between Blacks and Jews, not all, but like really committed, powerful, passionate allyship between the Black and Jewish community, and that you should know that history. So when you talk about maybe it's a monument or a statue, one of the things I just heard recently was that when you go to the African American History Museum in DC or the Holocaust Museum in DC, there's nothing in either museum that speaks to that collaboration. And so there's even a group that's thinking about, like, is there maybe some kind of an exhibition or something that could happen, because the first group of soldiers that came to Auschwitz to free and liberate the people in the Holocaust were Black soldiers, right? And the Tuskegee Airmen, right? So like there's a lot of shared history that we're losing. And it's really because all of us in this room have an obligation to know our shared history and then to share that with our young people. So someone said, yeah, every Black church, every temple, every school, it needs to be that these messages go everywhere. And film is such a beautiful universal language that, a lot of our young people don't necessarily read books, right? They're on TikTok and YouTube and so forth, but they will watch an amazing film like the one that Ilana has produced here, and some of the other films in our series. So getting young people to come together, getting families to come together, as that suggestion was a great one, and then making sure we are the ambassadors passing these messages along to our children and our grandchildren so that they all understand the shared legacy that we have.
One of the things that I thought was really interesting was that you had the Jewish owners of the park and the Nazi on the same side, basically supporting segregation. Can you speak about that?
I mean, what is there to say? Right? I mean...
No, because I didn't say, I guess we don't want to be on the same side as the Nazis. We were going to integrate. Obviously, there was a financial interest, and so, politics makes strange bedfellows, and in this case, economics makes strange bedfellows. Yes, ma'am.
I have a very specific film question, so I'm not going to, because I've seen it, and we've talked before. So I very specifically have a question about your choice of aesthetic, specifically for the Super 8 and the 8 that you found. Now, was that actual?
Oops,
I'll repeat it.
They have it?
No, I'll repeat the question when you're done because they can't hear it back there.
Okay, sorry. So it's about the aesthetic of the film, particularly at the beginning with the archival footage. That footage was so pristine. Where did you get that, or was that in an archive, or did you get it actually? Because it looked like it came from the park, and I'm like, where did you get that?
So the question is where the footage come from, specifically the Super 8 archival. So, like I could write a book about where each of these pieces of footage came from, and like most of them are like just incredibly moving miracles to me that we found them. So I think the footage that you're talking about is a really interesting story. You mean the footage of the park? That's really beautiful.
At the beginning, in that old roller coaster, it was like,
right.
Wow, that was gorgeous.
Okay, so a lot of this was like chasing down rumors and all kinds of things. And for Bannockburners, the footage of Bannockburn, most of it comes from the film footage that Jeffrey Small shot when he was 14 because he got a camera for his bar mitzvah. And I'm not kidding. And somebody told me, oh, you should see Jeffrey Small. I remember he used to be around the neighborhood with the camera, and so like I found Jeffrey Small and like luckily he had it and But so this is like a similar, like there's a rumor of a rumor of a rumor that there was a gentleman, a cinematographer who was, at the time a professional and prominent cinematographer named George American, and he lived like 5 minutes from the park in Glen Echo. And so he actually like took his 4 children, like every year they spent time at the park and on the merry-go-round. So a lot of that are his home movies of his kids. And then in like 1946, I think it was, he shot a film on spec for the park that he was hoping that they would buy and use for promotion, and they never did. And it just languished. And so eventually I found a man who had befriended George, a filmmaker who had befriended George before he died. And when George died, his family was like, we have these like hundreds of boxes of cans of footage in the basement. Like, what do you want to, like, what do we do with them? And he managed to sell them pretty much like sight unseen to the Library of Congress. But years ago. And so I found Jeff, and Jeff told me about this and that they were at the Library of Congress, but they were like in a storage unit in like, Yemensville, Virginia. And it took years of me like begging the Library of Congress to get them to at least give them catalog numbers so that I could then access them and see them. So I watched, I don't want to tell you, like I watched this man's like entire life, of all these kids growing up. And anyway, so that is where that footage came from.
Wow.
All right, yes, sir.
Ilana, speech that you made to start the session off about Jews and people. This is not about how great the Jews were to black people. This is about the history. And I've worked in the Roxbury, Mattapan, and Dorchester the last 25 years, trying to build relationships between blacks and white people, really, because I'm a Jew, but it wouldn't have really made too much difference. It was a little harder being a Jew. But there is an underlying, the best black people in Roxbury have a tremendous amount of resentment against not just Jewish people, but white people. Rightfully so. But, so it's really important that you speak, when this is shown in schools, it's going to be, it's our churches, or in the Nation of Islam, that you present what you said before they see this movie. Because to see this movie, it looks like an excuse for what's going on, and don't believe that white people and Jews are really great people, because they still know the rents they paid, and they still know the persecution they were under by all white people for the most part. And so it's really important to know where you're coming from, rather than have them let the people know where you're coming from, rather than them try to figure it out from the show, because it's going to be taken as a propaganda video, a show that tries to explain how great white people are to black people now, and how great they've been over the last 100 years. And that's not the purpose. That's not your purpose.
Yes, I will say to that point, and we talked over dinner, or I think you mentioned also here, that there's a complexity between our communities and how we have drifted apart over time. But again, people are working actively to come together. For all of our events that we do at the Redstone Family Foundation, we start by setting that context that we are coming together to build bridges, that we are coming together to rekindle the relationship and the allyship that we once had, that we are coming together to strengthen bonds between our community. So that intention has to start at the beginning, and you have to name the fact that, yeah, there are some things, there are some conversations that we will have that need to happen in smaller groups, and we have done that. So we will come together as 80 people in a room, we'll come together as 100 people in a room, we'll sit down to dinner with 12 people in a room. When the conversations need to get more complex. But I think we have to start the conversation. I think you have to start from the place of our shared humanity and the fact that, again, there is a history here between our two communities that is worth holding on to. And that we have, in this current context, with the new administration coming in, like the need for a focus on unity over division is going to be more important than ever, no matter who you voted for. That there are going to be things where we need to stand together as allies, because you cannot fight racism or anti-Semitism in a vacuum. It's always going to take allies from other communities and building that cross-cultural coalition and understanding.
So I have a question for you. Oh, okay.
Yeah. And the Glen Echo people. Let's hear from the Glen Echo folks.
Yes, yes. Oh, one of the Glen Echo people. Yes, sir.
Yeah,
Banneker. Okay.
yeah.
Oh, she said it.
No, that's actually a really important difference.
That's a difference,
because they're two different neighborhoods, and Glen Echo was really in support of segregation. So the town of Glen Echo was completely distinct from Bannockburn.
Yeah.
I'm told we have time for one more question.
Oh, okay.
Wow. Pick.
Well, I guess we have to talk. Go ahead.
Yeah, I grew up in Bannockburn, also was on the picket line. My sister Vicky was in the, Vicky Pollock was in the film. I think it should be seen as history. That's what it was. I think it does a wonderful job of describing how, probably the first time that I'm aware of, that whites and blacks were on a picket line together, and what an important part of the civil rights movement that was. And the people, as you saw in the movie, who went on to be on the Freedom Ride, Stokely Carmichael went on with Stick, and there was just a tremendous amount of history that people are unaware of that I think is very critical that it's covered so well in this film.
I think Susan is dying to say something back there. Go ahead.
On a lighter note, I was here in 2009 for Praying with Leo.
2007. Yeah.
2007, and I loved it. But you mentioned or alluded to the fact that the Boston Jewish Film Festival was a very important. Oh, yes.
So you want to get to the gossip. Yeah, so I'm happy to tell this story. So in 2007, I had a film called Praying with Leor that played here, and it was a beautiful reception. I think it won the audience award, and actually Ed referred to me tonight as a cicada because it's been 17 years. But at that screening, someone who, so the film is about Leor, who has Down syndrome and had an incredible spirituality about him and a very vaunted place in his community, and it is about his bar mitzvah. So at the film festival, after the film showed, it's somewhere out in the lobby afterwards, a woman named Ellen Bernstein, who was friends with Leor's family but lived here in the area, she saw the film. I guess she decided that I did right by her family, by her friends, and so she came up to me afterwards and she said, hey, I have somebody I want to set you up with. And it was a very circuitous route, but that is my husband, and I have 2 children, and they exist in large part because of a moment that happened at the Boston Jewish Film Festival.
So now we're done.
Okay. I'll be in the lobby. I'm happy to answer more questions.